a lot of people are doing pieces on Solo's failure at the box office. And I see a lot of people making excuses, trying to uncover why the film underperformed, as they say. It's not really a great mystery, but I am going to look up the top 9 reasons because there's a few other reasons, but honestly, some of them are just so ridiculous that it's not even worth my time to try to debunk them or whatever. Okay, so let's see. These are the top 9 excuses that we've been given on why Solo failed at the box office. Number 1, the number 1 reason that I found that most people say is Star Wars fatigue. Yes, Star Wars fatigue. That means that everybody out there is getting tired of Star Wars. Now, this kind of flies in the face of basically everything. Well, first off, let's take a look at the Marvel movies. The Marvel movies have been out for 10 years, and they're thriving to the point where now instead of 1 or 2 movies out, there's 3 movies out a year. Now, that might not always be the case every year, but every Marvel film has performed admirably. If you just take a look at this year alone, Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War released 3 months apart from each other, both billion-dollar blockbusters. Now, this to me does not look like the cause of fatigue. When you can have multiple films in your franchise come out the same year and score big. Why isn't Marvel fatigue? Can it be the content, maybe? We'll get to that in a moment. But there is enough good stories to tell with enough different eras to cover to please everyone. Because we have a large sandbox to play in for Star Wars. We've got, like I said, there's the smugglers, there's the Jedi, there's the rebels versus the Empire. You can do pre Episode 1 films. You can do Knights of the Old Republic, which a lot of people are clamoring for, which I don't particularly like, by the way. You can do post-Jedi stuff before. Some people are suggesting, if they're going to recast Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and stuff like that, and do post-Jedi films, post-Return of the Jedi films, before The Force Awakens. And also, it doesn't make any sense that when you consider the age we're in, the Netflix age, the binge-watching age, where people take a whole season of a show and watch it within a week. I mean to tell me, people can sit there and watch episode after episode, season after season on things like Netflix, things of Hulu and that nature, and don't get tired of it. But they get tired of Star Wars, one of the greatest, most imaginative franchises possible. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. When people were watching Cobra Kai, what did they say? They wanted season 2 the same day. Everybody watched it in a day or in 2 days. My case was 2 days. But they wanted more. And that's kind of what you expect from Star Wars. You should always be left wanting more. And I don't believe that people are fatigued of Star Wars. They're fatigued of Disney Star Wars. And when I say Disney Star Wars, it's basically the higher-ups at Lucasfilm. Disney is only a figurehead because they're the ones paying the bills the same way as they are for Marvel. Why is Marvel doing so much better? Because Marvel has Kevin Feige, Lucasfilm has Kathleen Kennedy. So basically, number 1, Star Wars fatigue. Wrong answer. All right, let's take a look at what the second excuse is. The second excuse, Solo Star Wars story was the film nobody wanted. Nobody wanted this film. Nobody wanted to see it. All right, I guess you're forgetting that Han Solo was probably in the top 3 most popular characters in Star Wars. I would argue, I don't know, who else would top him? I mean, maybe Darth Vader, maybe Obi-Wan. I'm not sure who would be more popular than Han Solo. Han Solo is the most popular character. And the character has an interesting history. And he's tied to all different characters. Like we were just saying about Boba Fett in the proposed Boba Fett solo. Boba Fett is only really tied to Jabba the Hutt. If you're going to have any kind of interesting connectivity with him, you connect him to Jabba the Hutt. Maybe Jabba sends him out on a mission of some sort. That's it. But with Han Solo, you've got a lot of interesting characters for him to interact with. He can interact with Jabba the Hutt. He can interact with Boba Fett. He can interact with Lando Calrissian. He can interact with Chewbacca, of course, because Chewbacca's a sidekick. There really isn't a lack of tools to tell the story with. There is not a lack of history that you can play with. We hear so much history, particularly in The Empire Strikes Back, but in all three of the movies. I mean, to see how he becomes basically a jaded space jockey. We only touched the surface of that in Solo, and I liked Solo. I mean, when I'm doing a video, unlike a lot of people who are just doing it to dance on the grave of this film, I'm trying to point out why it failed and why they need to move away from some of the things they've been doing and not just point fingers of blame and excuses that really don't amount to anything. So, number two, Han Solo, the film nobody wanted. Not a good excuse. Again, Han Solo's popular. You got a great toy box there to play with. There's no reason it shouldn't have been a success. Everybody loves Han Solo. Everybody loves Star Wars. All right, number three. It came out in May, too close to The Last Jedi, and Christmas is the go-to time for a Star Wars movie. Again, that's ridiculous. Star Wars came out in May for the first, I don't know, 20 years of its existence. May is traditionally the best time for Star Wars movies. The time everybody ever went to see a Star Wars movie was always in May. Only when Disney bought Lucasfilm and they started putting Star Wars in December was because, of course, the Marvel movies had taken residence in May in the Memorial Day selection. So they had to move them somewhere else. And the next best place they could figure to find them where they wouldn't compete with their own film was in December. So, and I've actually argued with people about this on Twitter because it makes no sense to me. Christmas has never been traditionally a Star Wars month. I mean, it has been for a couple of movies, but that shouldn't make the reason for a failure of the film. You should be able to put a Star Wars movie out in any month conceivably in the entire year and still have it be successful. So that's bogus. That's a bogus excuse. Number four, crowded theaters. Now, they had too much competition between Avengers, Infinity War, Deadpool 2, and they couldn't find their slice of the action. That's BS. Bologna sandwiches. First off, Avengers Infinity War was already out a month, and it did all the business it was going to do, and yeah, it probably still drew some fans back for the seventh or eighth viewing, but let's face it, everybody that was going to see Infinity War already had their chance to see Infinity War multiple times. And Deadpool 2 is an R-rated comedy. Now, no kids are going to go see that, or at least if you have if you have a responsible parent, they're not going to see that. But it's not going to be, or it should not be doing the same business as Star Wars. Star Wars makes Star Wars money. Deadpool will be making Deadpool R-rated money. And the problem with this is that people don't understand. Star Wars is the big dog. Films move their release dates for fear of Star Wars, not vice versa. Star Wars doesn't move their release dates because they're afraid they're not going to get any business. That's what everybody else does to Star Wars. Star Wars is the premier franchise. Let's not forget that. That's the reason why a lot of people are beating up the film over its underperforming because, even the most milk toast Star Wars film should, make 700 million, and it's probably not on track to make that. If it does, it'll just barely make it. So, no seat in the theaters because of crowded films surrounding it. That's ridiculous as well. Okay, let's move on here. Number 5. I wish I had 10 because this could be a top 10, but no, there's only 9. Number 5, Lord and Miller got a raw deal. Now, this suggests that Lord and Miller have as big following as Zack Snyder, who, a lot of Zack Snyder's acolytes stood away from Justice League because Zack Snyder wasn't getting full control over the film and his say was not being met because it was given to Joss Whedon because supposedly, at least, Zach felt that personal problems were family problems were something that was a priority to him. So Lord and Miller got canned, and you know the story. Ron Howard got brought in, sort of a safe choice to take over, and he basically took one for the team. You can't tell me that Lucasfilm knew this film was going to underperform. They knew because they knew what the previous film was, but we'll get to that in a moment. It's similar to the way Joss Whedon took one for the team for Justice League. I think they knew right off the bat that they really weren't going to turn to Joss Whedon for much more than this, but he was competent enough to, nurse the film into existence. Now, honestly, from all accounts, Lord and Miller were making a slapstick comedy. They're famous for doing Lego Batman and a couple other things that I'm not familiar with. But from what I understand, they wanted to make it sort of a comedy, possibly like Guardians of the Galaxy-esque. And it was bordering on parody. That was sort of the complaints that reports were saying. Now, we already had enough of that in The Last Jedi, where to me, that film was bordering on parody when you see Luke Skywalker throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder and milking an alien walrus. That stuff, that's parody. And I think they were pretty, astute enough to not let this become too slapstick, too Guardians of the Galaxy. And so I think that Lord and Miller leaving was not a bad thing. So Lord and Miller getting the shaft. No, that's not the answer either. Okay, let's take a look at the next one here. What is this? Alden Ehrenreich is a bad choice. Is Alden Ehrenreich a bad choice as Han Solo? Well, let's face it, you can't please anybody. Nobody could step into Harrison Ford's boots and be Harrison Ford. Nobody was going to do it. Nobody was good enough. I mean, you could give a decent impression of Harrison Ford as a young man, but that does not, take on a life of its own as an actor. Now, if Alden gave too close of an impression, he'd be criticized for not making the role his own. If he strayed too far away from Ford's imprint on the character, they'd say he couldn't capture Ford's charm. So it's basically a thankless role. I think he did a fine job in what was a thankless situation. I think when you put Alden up against his peers playing previously established iconic characters, like Chris Pine playing Kirk, or Sean Patrick Flannery playing Indiana Jones, he more than makes the grade. Because as good an actor as Pine is, he didn't feel like Captain Kirk all the time. He felt like Captain Kirk maybe 10% of those movies. And Sean Patrick Flannery, I honestly liked him as young Indiana Jones when they did the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. But honestly, did he have anything in common with Harrison Ford? No. When you put Alden Ehrenreich on that same plateau, against his peers, I would say Alden got Ford probably about 35% of the time. Let's say, 30 to 35% of the time. So that's not a bad average when you're trying to emulate an iconic character. So blaming Alden on this one, I don't get it. Nah, it's not his fault. It has nothing to do with him. All right, this one, probably the most ridiculous one. It doesn't even deserve to be mentioned because it's so absurd. But number 7, films headed by straight white men are box office poison. Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm not even going to move on. I'm not even going to entertain that one. I got to move on from that one because that's ridiculous. All right. What are we on? Number 8. Number 8. People are getting tired of Star Wars getting the SJW treatment. All right, so actually we've got one here that does kind of ring true. Star Wars has gotten the SJW treatment since it's been taken over by Lucasfilm. Now, we all knew this was going to happen. They were going to do the cram for diversity, and of course, I've got to always, in case you're 3 years old, I've got to specify that diversity is not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is not something that should be the single most important aspect of putting a movie or story or production together. That's something you do after the fact, when you've got a story, when you've got, the world ready to play. Now, getting a character like L3, who was droids' rights and struck a chord that was too real world. And that was never something that Star Wars was all about. Star Wars was always the escapist fantasy. And having things about droid rights and having the feminist girl power stuff in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and reports of Lando being Pan just before the film was to release, which didn't turn out to be this big issue in the movie, but was still enough to sort of put a taint on Lando's character. It didn't endear fans to them. All this stuff doesn't endear fans to them. And they don't seem to understand that. They don't seem to understand that when you push more of this 2018 social political garbage in your face, you're not going to get a good reaction from people who simply want to see a good Star Wars movie without all the SJW politics and virtue signaling and interrupting their escapist entertainment for it. It's ridiculous to try to force that stuff in it. But, you know, we've seen it happen before. It happened with Gamergate, which I'm not really a gamer, so I really, I was sitting out on that one. It happened with Comicsgate, and again, I was a passive uh, dissenter with that one because I really haven't read comics in a long time because they were getting so bad. Starting in like the mid 90s, it got worse and worse. But now that it's happening in Star Wars, a lot of people are sitting up and taking note that why are we putting so much attention on the SJW politics? Why are we putting so much attention on all this virtue signaling crap when all we want to do is see a good movie? So that one does have merit. Let's call that one what it is. All right, and the final one, number 9, The Last Jedi left a very bad taste in fans' mouths, leading to a boycott. Again, there is some truth to this one. Of course, The Last Jedi wasn't very well received, although it does have its fans. And of course, again, I got to make the statement that if you like The Last Jedi, nothing wrong with that. I've got nothing against you for liking it. It's fine. It is what it is. But the fact is that it did lead so many fans to become disenfranchised with the franchise that they felt so strongly about this that they wanted to have a boycott of the next film. And that is basically why Solo is suffering, because a lot of people just wanted to boycott this one, clear out, to send a strong message to the higher ups at Lucasfilm, to Kathleen Kennedy, that this train is on the wrong tracks. They're going in the wrong direction here, and we really need to shape up. Now, again, I feel bad for it because I don't think Solo is the film that needed to be the scapegoat for Kennedy's mismanagement. But, you know, people weren't going to wait around for episode 9. And it's kind of a strategic thing with Disney, I think, where they put Solo out so early after The Last Jedi so that it could take the brunt of all of this criticism and complaint, leaving episode 9 free and clear for a full year and a half before they have to listen to any criticism again. So it makes sense. It's the strategic thing to do, I think, to try to get the furor over with fast, and hopefully in the intervening over a year, you know, well, probably a year at least until we get some, you know, production talk about it again. Will they with the trailer and they start hyping up the movie? So it's about a year. It's pretty much the same thing that um, Warner Brothers did with Aquaman. Now, Justice League came out and they knew they were just giving it the bum's rush. They were giving it the bum's rush. They're just putting it out in theaters saying, look, we know that we kind of hacked it up and did the best we could with a sinking ship, but we'll take the brunt of it, and then you just forget about it when Aquaman comes out, and we'll carry on. Kind of the same thing we're seeing here. Mismanagement, woeful mismanagement by Kathleen Kennedy, to the point where now even some of her staunchest supporters are beginning to throw her under the bus. Uh, you know, she's failed to make good on her promise when Lucas left her in charge of Lucasfilm of safeguarding these beloved characters. And, you know, fans are being left as an afterthought when the films are being developed. It's not about what will appeal to the fans, like Kevin Feige's outlook when they're doing Marvel films. It's you can't have fans involved in the consideration when you're trying to busy to virtue signal and get your SJW politics out. And of course, any criticisms they receive from fans are shouted down by the typical SJW chorus of "you must be sexist, racist, homophobic." Politics and diversity had its place in Lucas's Star Wars, but not at the expense of the story. And that's kind of the problem they're facing, that not enough people are that are in the production side of this are worried about. They're not worried about the story. They're basically just trying to get their politics in it, and it's just a very sad state of affairs. Let's put it that way. So once again, basically the reasons why uh, the solo Star Wars story failed financially, at least at the box office, is because came after The Last Jedi. It was basically the sacrificial lamb to try to throw people's disgust with The Last Jedi onto a pretty benign target, because now they could use the excuses of, well, they could use all the excuses that I've just listed, but they could use the excuses of it was a straight white man's film that nobody liked. Everybody wants to see the feminist trappings of Rey in Episode 9, and they can complain about nobody wanted to see a Han Solo film, which is ridiculous because Han Solo is one of the most beloved characters in the franchise with a lot of interesting stories to tell. So, again, that's where it's at. Thank you for joining me once again. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, so thank you for joining me once again, and always remember, keep that flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.